From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, I want to welcome you to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. And this is one beautiful time of the year in this incredible state. As I say each week, because we are the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi Radio Network, or on Super Talk TV at C-Spire TV. But if you're listening on Facebook or YouTube or your favorite podcast, it's December the 12th, 2022. Incidentally, it is my wife Ann's birthday. We call her GGB, and she's an amazing woman. So happy birthday, Ann. God bless you. Just a very special person. Listen, as we enter this week, we got some cold weather coming this week, so some of our conversations will drift off into that direction. That is for sure. Hey, listen, I always say that I'm coming to you from the Foundation Studio. I'm really honored to be able to say that, because this organization, the Foundation for Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, is working so hard every day to protect the outdoors heritage in the great state of Mississippi, and I'm honored to be a part of them. And you know what? One of the things I mentioned last week is their ability to form coalitions, to work with others, to form powerful coalitions is really unprecedented in the state. You saw it with the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund, but there's this powerful coalition of outdoors and conservation organizations that have now come together. And I think we'll see more of that coalition going forward, tackling issues that are important to outdoorsmen. And really excited about that. You know, when a coalition of the kind of organizations that we're talking about come together like that, whoo, when they get locked onto an issue, that's a really important thing. So they're doing some great work in this state. Hey, I spent the warm weekend up in the Mississippi Delta, and spent two full days of hunting some lockdown bucks. And my friend Mark Creech and Terry Waldrop were with me. It was just great being there. I just love being in the Delta. Got stuck. I pulled up on a light rain, and it got heavy while I was hunting. And my truck literally sunk, and Mark's got a really nice Jeep, so it wasn't a big deal. We hooked the tow rope, which we've used 1,000 times, and pulled me out, and all was well. But man, there's nothing like Delta gumbo. When it's dry, it's like concrete, and when it's wet, it's like, I don't know, quicksand. It's a special kind of mud, and we've talked about that before. Books have been written about that mud in the Mississippi Delta. I know if you've been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You just kind of go with the flow in that situation. That's for sure. Hey, listen, the second half of the show, I've actually invited Houston Havens to come back and join me. He's from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, and he's the waterfowl coordinator. We've got a cold weekend coming up. We'll kind of get a sense of what he thinks the duck hunting situation is going to be. But unfortunately, you're starting to read in the headlines about an avian influenza outbreak that's happening, and Mississippi, unfortunately, is not immune to that. I want to get Houston's thoughts on that and see if there's anything we can do to help the agency make some observations and report some cases. And we'll get what he has to say about that here in just a second. Hey, listen, I mentioned this major coalition of organizations that have come together. A member of that organization is Wildlife Mississippi. And my friend James Cummings had been on this show several times. He's been on my show, Coast View on the Coast, several times, when the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that Delbert Hoseman and I talked about last week was in the midst of the legislative process. We talked a lot about why this was important to Mississippi. But I've invited James back to the show to find out what the latest is in his organization and just talk outdoors in Mississippi. So without any further ado, let me bring my friend James Cummings, the Executive Director of Wildlife Mississippi, into the conversation. How you doing, James?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to have you back. Listen, it's a glorious time of the year in Mississippi, isn't it?
Oh my goodness! Except if you're stuck in Delta gumbo. So,
hey, I'd rather be there than on a highway driving somewhere for sure.
Oh God, anytime, but always east of Omaha.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I said that though, man, I could see you smile. You seem to know the Delta gumbo well.
Have a very close personal relationship with Delta gumbo, and I may be wrong, but I've probably been stuck a lot more than you because I'm not very good at that. So,
Well, I'm a coast boy, and I had to learn many years ago how to do it. My son Jordan, he's hilarious because I put it I put it 4-wheel drive, and I just kind of ease along. I don't try to spin the wheels. I just usually I do really well. Jordan, on the other hand, he puts the pedal to the metal. He says there's only two ways to go forward for him when he's in the mud. One is extraordinarily not stuck, which means the truck is high, the truck is sideways, or extraordinarily stuck. So anyway, people who've been there before, especially with the amount of rain we've finally gotten, I think they know this story really well. Have you had the opportunity to be out in the outdoors recently?
I have. I've been enjoying some bird hunting, and then I guess the most fun thing I've been doing is working with one of my people on staff, Jason May, and his son Matthew. He's 6 years old. He killed his second doe last weekend, and I'm working with him trying to help him get his first buck. So we've got which is going to be kind of sad if he kills this particular buck, because he's probably 19-inch spread, 8-point, 250 pounds, which is not something you want to start out as a 6-year-old, because then it ruins the rest. So,
hey, I got you. Two quick stories to say. One is, and I've mentioned it here a few weeks ago, we have kind of an annual youth hunt that we do prior to the season starting. And this year, my friend Jake Carter and his daughter Ava, and then my two nephews, Peter and Nico Bohanovich, joined us, and my son Jordan. And they all three killed 8 points, their first bucks, all three in the same afternoon, man. And I thought, man, the season could be over now. It'd be fine with me, And then I have a young man. I lease a lot of land from the Dunn family. They're big farmers up in the Mississippi Delta. And Clinton's son, Jackson, who's hunted with me several times. He's just a terrific young man. He hunted by himself yesterday for the first time, and he killed a monster 8-point, man. And I thought to myself, that's not a good start. The bar is high already. I mean, that's incredible. We're really proud of Jackson. I know he's got to be pumped, but what a great first experience. But man, taking kids into the outdoors and being part of that, nothing else really matters, does it?
That's really what it's all about. I was fortunate to have, my father and grandparents that took me at our old home places now around, Winona and Kilmichael, at the family farm, and getting me introduced. And I guess you'd say I got addicted, and maybe way addicted.
So addicted, you committed your career to it. You've written books about conservation in America, and you're a noted author, and you're a passionate guy who understands conservation in this state. Hey, remind people what Wildlife Mississippi is.
So Wildlife Mississippi, it's a private nonprofit organization. Primarily, we work in several areas in conservation education, fish and wildlife habitat, conservation policy, and outdoor recreation. And a lot of what you asked earlier about some of the hunts, but I've also been spending a lot of time and working on the upcoming farm bill. And a lot of what we're trying to do there is really trying to develop and make sure that we have conservation incentives that are good for conservation, not only in Mississippi, but good for Mississippi landowners. So that's a lot of what we're working on right now too.
Yeah, you're an expert in that area. And for people who may not realize this, that one of the reasons that I became so adept at understanding the application of the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that we passed last year and was signed into law, $10 million initially going into that trust fund, was partly due to James and what he taught me, what he shared with me about it, what he's written about private land conservation efforts, what he knew. He's an expert when it comes to where the federal funds are. And I've talked many times, and Delbert and I talked about this last week, James, that the opportunity for us to match and to see a board that's been assigned, the trustees over the Conservation Trust Fund, really focused on making sure that we put a priority on federal matching funds. About, I don't know, maybe 90%, maybe it's more, come from the Farm Bill, which is people who don't have a good understanding. Think about CRP and WRP, something like that. But the opportunity to take $10 million and turn it into $30, $40, $50 million, that's real, isn't it, James?
That's 100% real, and I certainly thank the legislature and Lieutenant Governor Hoseman for making this a reality. And if you look at the recent Inflation Reduction Act, that added 21 billion in conservation incentives to the Farm Bill. So besides the annual 6 billion that the United States funds, I mean, we've got a big piece on top of that.
Big opportunities for Mississippi. Hopefully next year we can get 20 million as promised, and that we can start having conversations about a dedicated funding source, so we're not coming back every year having to come back to the legislature to do this. This is a long-term deal, multi-year projects through the federal matching fund opportunities, and we need this to be a dedicated funding source at some point in the near future. Hey, when we come back, I actually heard last week something that concerned me, the notion that we might consider selling whitetail deer in Mississippi. That sounds like it's opening up Pandora's box. When we come back, I want to ask James about it. We'll see you after this.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend, the Executive Director for Wildlife Mississippi, James Cummings, with me, and really enjoyed the visit at the first part of the show. But as I mentioned, I got a note from a friend who enlightened me a little bit about a conversation that was going on behind the scenes about the possibility of selling whitetail deer in Mississippi. Well, it's interesting because in the run-up to my conversation with Delbert Hosemann, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, last week, I actually did some reading about the North American conservation movement, because I'm not only am I interested in that conversation and in that wildlife conservation effort, but Aldo Leopold been really studying his role and how it all fits together, not knowing actually at the time that there would be some effort to debate in our state about whether we should enable and allow and make legal the selling of whitetail deer. My immediate reaction was, wow, that doesn't sound like a good thing. It sounds like we might open up Pandora's box. But to be honest with you, I don't know enough about it to really know. I did a little bit more research, discovered that there was a Jim Hood opinion at some point along the way. More recently, there was a new Attorney General opinion, and it seemed to sort of go against what Jim Hood did. So I'm learning more about it. Someone actually mentioned to me that they believe they had the votes already to be able to pass such a regulation. And to my knowledge, unless I missed something, there hasn't been much public discussion about this or any big debate about it. So I figured, this is usually I like to talk about hunting and fishing and all that, but every now and then an issue is going to pop up that gets your attention, and this is one of them. And I wanted to ask James to kind of give me his belief and opinion on whether he believes allowing the sale of whitetail deer in Mississippi would open up Pandora's box. What's your thought about that, James?
That's extremely disturbing. It kind of almost already having a vote sounds like something that might be going on in the U.S. House, not in Mississippi. You mentioned Aldo Leopold. If you go back in time in the 1920s, when the only southern state he visited was Mississippi, one of the things that he found was certainly a lack of a conservation movement, but he also noticed that there was an intense and popular interest in game and hunting, and that had exceeded any other state that he had surveyed. And I think as we continue to move forward with learning about this opinion, or we're going to make policy based on this opinion, I think you're going to see, Mississippi sportsmen that is kind of in our genetic makeup of having an intense and popular interest in hunting. We don't like it. We don't like it when you mess with our dogs, and we don't like it when you mess with our hunting. And I think if you're going to start unraveling what's been set up, I mean, this is not England in the 16 and 1700s anymore. We set up this system in colonial America that the public owned wildlife. We saw what was happening in England where the king and his friends owned guns and they owned wildlife and they owned the hunting rights. And we set up a system in the United States very early on that was the opposite of that, because we'd learned from bad experiences. So this very much bothers me. and it bothers me if you look at Mississippi, look at Pittman Robertson, that system that we have that funds wildlife conservation. Keith Pittman was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Look at the public trust doctrine and a lot of the writings that have been done on that. If you look at the wildlife policy book that exists in the United States, the public trust doctrine chapter was written by the late Dr. Bruce Leopold from Starkville, Mississippi. If I look at fair chase hunting, that was born at Onward when Theodore Roosevelt refused to shoot, a tied up black bear. All of these things are getting ready to come into play. And I'm very concerned about where this is heading. And to some extent, I'm almost at a loss of words over it. Because
hey, you know what's interesting, James? One of the things, this is a great story that came out, written by Greg Tinsley in the most recent Mossy Oaks newsletter. And it actually has an article about Leopold, so the Oracle of American Conservation. And one of the things that he said that by creating the North American model of wildlife conservation, that he said that we probably, likely would not have survived the modern anti-hunting movement, which found its disingenuous voice in America during his lifetime. To me, that's a side deal, but sort of an umbrella over this conversation. That why would we introduce an issue in Mississippi that would cause hunters to fight with hunters, the outdoor community fight with the outdoor community, when we should be lockstep around what has made Mississippi the capital of the outdoors in America? It has been the fact that we've embraced a North American model for wildlife conservation. And, we gave in a little bit to high fence, and that regulation is out there now. But very quickly, I read it last night, actually, it says right at the very top that the sale of wildlife is prohibited. And so where do you think this is headed?
I certainly hope if you look at some of the other states like Texas and Missouri, they tried to do the same thing. And I can tell you where it headed there. It ended up in their state Supreme Court. And they reaffirmed. I was in Austin, Texas not long ago, and had the opportunity to visit with Carter Smith, and told him this effort was going on, and Carter's retiring from Texas, and there's been a lot of fights out there in Texas over this stuff, but the public won, and wildlife in Texas still belongs to the public, just like wildlife in Missouri.
Remind us who Carter Smith is.
So Carter Smith is the Lynn Posey of Texas, so to speak. So he's the executive director of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Yeah. But what's troubling to me is that there seems to be politics involved in this. That's, we'll uncover more as we go forward. But to say that they believe they already had the votes to make this happen, and we haven't had a public debate about it, that's troubling in and of itself.
Well, I think one of the things that we've got to remind ourselves is the regulations around enclosures in Mississippi are not so much about the enclosure. It's about, in order to protect native wildlife and the recreational economy utilizing native wildlife. It's in order to protect what you and I have been enjoying. It's about protecting our right to get stuck in the gumbo. It's not about the high fence. It's about what the rest of us enjoy. There's 780,000 people that hunt and fish in Mississippi. A candidate's position, 8 out of 10 of us say the candidate's position is extremely important, whether that be Governor Reeves's Commission on Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks or the Attorney General's opinion. There's a system of checks and balances there. I think we'll end up in a good spot, but I think we need to be watching what's going on, because taking wildlife and turning it back to the king, so to speak, is not what this country was founded on.
Did you see in the Jim Hood opinion and the most recent Attorney General opinion, did you see a conflict between the two of those?
It's like they were written in different worlds. And what's rather interesting is, by nature, conservation is conservative. The Jim Hood opinion is conservative. It puts our native fish and wildlife resources first and foremost in terms of protecting those. And unfortunately, the most recent AG opinion, I thought it was a very liberal approach to it. And I don't think we ended up in a system that it protects our native wildlife, or it's in the best interest of sportsmen and women in the state.
That's a strong feeling. Again, my initial reaction, having just read a lot about Aldo Leopold, was that this can't be good. that's what my reaction was. And so if you're a hunter in Mississippi, if you especially love deer hunting in Mississippi, what's your message to those guys as they're riding in their pickup trucks to or from their land as we speak right now, enjoying the free roaming wildlife that we have? What's your message to them?
I think they need to follow what their elected officials are doing. They need to make sure that they are holding them accountable for their actions, and hopefully they'll be good actions. I'm a believer in the glass is half full. I'm hoping that maybe with a little bit more education, we'll end up in a good spot, and that it, when the commission does, take a vote, if they end up taking a vote on something, that we do put our native wildlife first. And I think the sportsman in Mississippi, as I'm riding around in my pickup truck east of Omaha, that I think of how do we go about protecting that, and what can I do as a private angler or private hunter to make sure that something that I dearly love. I don't play golf. I've never been on a golf course in my life, but I try to hunt and fish every day I can. And that's what a lot of people in Mississippi are all about. And I think we've got to follow this, because we can't just, let's look at Jackson's drinking water supply. That was taken away from them because they were not good stewardships of that. Something similar could happen in terms of our wildlife as well.
So at this point, other than, we're just hearing a lot of scuttlebutt that there is a serious effort underway behind the scenes to make the sale of whitetail deer legal in Mississippi. We're just sort of broaching the issue today, but in future shows we will drill down and try to understand who's behind this. Who are the people who are behind this? Who are those who say they're going to vote for this when we haven't even had a public conversation yet? Let's hope none of that is true, and that we can, as you say, get educated and understand we do not want to open that Pandora's box in this state at this time. That's the last thing we need. God bless you, my friend. It's been a pleasure to visit with you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show.
You bet. Hey, this has been James Cummings. And listen, as I end up every show, Super Talk Outdoors, please stay safe. For God's sake, please stay safe. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
This is Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi radio network, or any of the other platforms you choose to engage with the show. We really appreciate it. And like I said last week, I really enjoy getting notes from listeners. And gosh, we have such a wide variety of people who pay attention to this show. And as I said, this is the time when we can all come together at the outdoors table and put our differences aside and enjoy the outdoors together. We should do more of that these days. As it relates to that last conversation that James Cummings and I had from Wildlife Mississippi, it is, let's hope that it's not true what we're hearing, the scuttlebutt that we're hearing about the move to make it legal to sell whitetail deer in Mississippi. I'm hoping that we don't have a big public debate and fight about that in the state, because we don't need hunters going after hunters. We should be joining hands. We want Mississippi to be the capital of the outdoors, and the reason we want Mississippi to be the capital of the outdoors because we've embraced the North American wildlife conservation effort that Aldo Leopold put into place, where wildlife belongs to everybody. And to allow the sale of whitetail deer, it seems to me to be a situation where we'd be opening up Pandora's box. We'll be talking more about that, obviously, on future shows, because something that I'm concerned about, and we all need to learn more about. That is for sure. So now let's shift gears. We're going to, it's interesting. Let me bring Houston Havens back into the conversation, the waterfowl program coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. He joined us last week. We kind of looked back on the season so far. But after we had Houston on, I started to see some headlines around this thing called the Avian Influenza situation that's affecting birds. I think in Mississippi we may have seen it in geese, but we'll have to hear from Houston about that. But I wanted to invite him back as we look forward to some more cold weather coming. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into a conversation about avian influenza and why we should be concerned about it. How you as hunters can help the department, help us gather data and information about the situation. So without any further ado, let me welcome back my friend Houston of Havens. How you doing, Houston?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Hey, look, so right out the bat, let's just do this. We got some snow up north, got this cold effort coming through, a lot of freezing conditions, got some cold weather coming this weekend. What's your early barometer tell you about how that's going to impact the next week or two?
Well, we're certainly looking forward to it. Hope that it definitely comes to fruition. I'm liking the long-term forecast, especially over the last several days of record or near record temperatures here in Mississippi. We hope to not see that too many more times, before the end of January. But yeah, things are coming around again. It looks like that we're going to get another blast of cold air from the north, and these birds are migratory. All the birds that we hope to have here before the season ends are not here yet, and so we're going to need a little bit of weather to encourage them to keep on coming south for sure.
Some of my friends who I hunt with bought some land in Chula, and they actually closed on it last week, and they went into one of their duck holes over there, and they saw some big ducks in there, even with it being super warm outside. It was hey, listen, we talked a little bit at the beginning. We've had some good rain, probably not the kind of gully washer that you are hoping that we would get, because it's time to get some water in Mississippi. But I got reintroduced, not that I needed it, to some good Delta gumbo. But I'm assuming you've been in the duck business for most of your life. You've gotten to know Delta gumbo pretty good. You've been stuck a few times?
Quite a few times, that's for sure. I don't even, they don't faze me anymore. I don't even put them in my memory bank. It's just part of the job or part of getting out and doing what you enjoy.
Yeah, I got it in my truck, man, and I had it in four-wheel drive, but I put it in drive, and I just felt the back wheels go, and then just spin in place. They really weren't that deep, but I've learned from experience that when you get in that situation, now you can rev it up all you want, and maybe 1 out of 100 times you'll probably get out, but what you really need is a tow rope.
That's right.
Just get over about a foot, and then you get you a little bit of traction and you get out. But yeah, I'm with you there, man. We've been stuck so many times we've forgotten about it. But that Delta gumbo will pile up on tires and break axles, and it do some damage, won't it?
It can. It's tough on equipment, and it'll surprise you. A lot of times you're just in it before you know it.
Hey, I had a note. I had to remind myself to do this. Steve Azar, who has in the Mississippi Minute on Super Talk Network, and has a new state song for Mississippi. And as you know, it's a theme song. One Mississippi is the theme song for Super Talk Outdoors. I need to tell him he needs to write a song about Delta gumbo. That would be a great song. He needs to have some fun with that, because he's from Greenville, so he knows it well, and he has a lot of friends who know it well.
That's right.
So anyway, just so that people have a sense of this who may have missed us last week, let's do a quick review on what you've seen in the season so far.
Yeah, opening weekend, like we talked about even before the season opened, kind of met expectations as far as low water levels, kind of having a concentrating effect on waterfowl, and so that's what we saw, particularly on public lands. Of course, we have not gotten an abundance of rainfall even since that time, and so that has kind of lingered on. This past weekend was a little bit surprising for what I've seen so far, just from social media posts and public land reports, that despite the warm weather, people still had some decent duck hunting, and so that's a really good sign. We hope to kind of kick this bad weather out or warm weather out and get more into what we'd like to see with cold weather coming from the north to kind of improve things and bring us some more birds. Looks like more water on the landscape is coming pretty soon. I know some areas got it over the weekend and some missed out on it a little bit, but more habitat is coming, so hopefully more birds are coming to use that habitat.
Since it's unfortunate, actually, that in the deer community, we have to talk about CWD, chronic wasting disease, and be aware of that and focus on that, and help the department gather data and help fight it. And then, for duck hunters and geese hunters, we're having a conversation now, unfortunately, about avian influenza. Why don't you tell people what it is, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper after that.
Yeah, so what we're dealing with currently in Mississippi and surrounding states is what we call a highly pathogenic strain of avian influenza. It's caused by an influenza type A virus, which can affect poultry and wild birds. We think about the flu that people get, and this is a bird version of the flu. It's impacts to human health are considered to be low currently, but we just want to be sure that people know about it. They're probably seeing some of it if they're out in the outdoors, seeing sick or dead birds, and just want to give them, proper guidance on, taking care, just having good sanitary conditions when they're either hunting or dealing with wild birds.
So when I was doing some research about it, when I first pulled up the avian influenza, the first thing that came up, as you mentioned, chickens. So a lot of chicken concerns as it related to that. And then when I put in a search that dealt with avian influenza Mississippi, what came up, the very first story that came up was about some geese that were found to have had it. And that makes some sense to me, because you think about the congregation of geese and how they get close together. And what you see is you see sick or dying or dead birds that obviously out in a field somewhere. Talk about how it manifests itself and what people might notice and how they can help the department.
Sure. So we've gotten all manner of reports from people in the field, mostly hunters, because they're out, using these same areas where a lot of these birds are. And like you said, snow geese in particular are the species that we have seen this virus in the most so far. Just like you said, they get in these really, really large concentrations, both on the ground and in wetlands in the Mississippi Delta, where people are usually seeing them, but also migrating over the entire state of Mississippi. A lot of these birds basically overshoot most of the state and go down to the Gulf Coast and settle in for the winter there. And so what we've seen is reports of anything from sick birds when a large group gets up and leaves a wetland or a field, leaving a few sick birds behind and kind of acting dizzy or walking or swimming in circles. Those are some of the signs that they've seen. But then also just kind of what people report is kind of random or odd occurrences of geese in areas where we don't usually see a lot of geese, like, in East Mississippi in the hills, where you just find one bird that's on the ground. It can't fly maybe, or maybe it's dead already. What we think is happening there is birds just falling out of these migrating flocks, getting too weak to fly or something like that, becoming ill and not being able to continue on further.
Where does it come from, Houston?
It developed or was first identified, I guess, in Europe and Asia, and just a strain that has manifests itself and continue to pass along through wild bird populations. And that's one of the reasons that we're interested in hearing reports of where birds are found, so we can do some testing. We certainly can't get out to every bird that people are reporting in Mississippi, but we're doing our best to get out and collect samples on these birds, get them to a lab to get them tested so we can see where it is and what it's affecting.
When we come back, we'll continue our conversation for the final segment of Super Talk Outdoors with Houston Havens, the waterfowl program coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. And we'll talk a little bit more about this and what you can do to help. We really are looking for samples, and we want to get your help. So we'll see you after this break.
Out on his limb, whistling that sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on, I'll carry on.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. Thank you for joining us today. This is the final segment of today's show, and I have my friend Houston Havens, who's the waterfowl program coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. We actually had him on last week, and we did a good full review of the season so far in the first segment of this conversation with Houston today. We were looking forward to this weekend and some cold weather coming down and some freezing conditions north of us, and that would be a great weekend. I know my son Jordan and his friends are really looking forward to getting out in the blind and see what they can come up with. But unfortunately, since we talked last week, all these headlines are starting to pop up about avian influenza, and most prominently seen in snow geese. Have you seen some occurrence of it with big ducks in Mississippi?
We've not found sick or dead ducks yet in Mississippi. We're hoping that it doesn't get to that point, but we're also doing some hunter-harvested bird testing. Those are primarily dabbling duck species, whether it's on wildlife management areas or private lands. And some of those birds have also tested positive, so that's just another kind of arm of the monitoring. We're not just responding to sick or dead waterfowl. We're kind of trying to get a total picture of it.
So if you're okay, there's two parts to this. One is there's no evidence that there's a risk to humans, although there's advice about, hunt what appear to be healthy birds and eat what appear to be healthy birds. But what more would you put to that?
For waterfowl hunters, particularly, of course, only harvest birds they're acting and looking healthy. If you're out in a field or in a duck hole and you see a bird that you didn't shoot that's acting wounded or sick or something, we're asking hunters, not to make contact with those birds. When you're cleaning or processing waterfowl, don't eat, drink, or smoke when handling those birds. Process birds in a well-ventilated area or outdoors, and in general, just use proper, cleanly techniques. Just keeping, a lot of people are wearing gloves, or we recommend wearing gloves just to be safe when you're handling any kind of wild game, just to be on the safe side. And also just keeping things clean and kind of disinfected after you're processing birds is a good way to kind of stay safe.
So what, and I mentioned samples a second ago. You guys are testing samples for sure, but if someone sees a sick or dying bird, is it your advice to gather that bird or leave it alone?
We ask that people leave it alone until they contact us. We do want people to contact us, let them know what they're seeing. Waterfowl hunters are a big part of conservation, and hunters and the general public are also a big help in monitoring in a situation like this. Let us know what you're seeing, and then we can make a determination on, does a biologist need to come out and take a sample on that bird or remove that bird or birds? And so we're kind of treating it on a case-by-case basis. But we do ask that people contact USDA Wildlife Services or our office. The Mississippi Board of Animal Health also has an online reporting form. It's really quick and easy to use for people just to, kind of let us know what they're seeing and where they are. There's also some good frequently asked question information by the Board of Animal Health out there if people want a lot more information on the virus.
So, as I did this morning, I think the quickest way, instead of me trying to convey numbers to people so they can write those numbers down, I think the fastest way to do that is just write avian. By the way, it's AVIAN, avian influenza, just like the flu that a human would get. Avian influenza, and put Mississippi and reporting in the Google search, and you'll get a bunch of opportunities pop up that you can let people know about. But just to be clear, if you're a hunter and you see a sick or dying bird or a dead bird, don't gather it up and then call them and tell them you got it. Just let them know where it is. Maybe send a pin to the officers after you make contact and do the reporting, and then they can decide whether they want to actually send someone out or not. But it's best not to handle those birds. Certainly don't eat them. Not that there's a current risk of eating them, but they're just saying play it safe. There's no evidence that avian influenza affects humans, but still, they want to be careful with that, don't you?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I should have mentioned earlier, USDA has put out recommendations for, cooking birds that are harvested. Of course, we only want people to harvest apparently healthy waterfowl, but when you do cook those birds, they recommend a temperature of 165 degrees. But, just again, to reiterate, risk for human transmission is considered to be low at this time.
It's interesting. It seems like we always have to face something like this, but yeah, I think Mississippi generally does a really good job of getting your arms around it, studying the issue, and helping us understand the scope and scale of the problem. And best thing to do is just let them know if you see such a thing. Houston, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Always enjoy it. Thank you.
I never thought we'd have you right back, but as soon as I saw the headline on avian influenza, I said, well, we got to have Houston back and see what our concerns should be, especially with duck hunting happening, giving advice to duck hunters about how to deal with this, how to report it, and how to make themselves safe. That's what it's all about. But it's been a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
As usual, as I end every segment, stay safe in the outdoors. Please stay safe. We want everybody to have a great, memorable time as we get further into next weekend and beyond. Man, there's going to be a lot of people out in the woods. Use respect, hunt ethically, and stay safe. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
Carry on, Mississippi.